Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is our session entitled Engaging Students Through a Technology-Enabled Work-Based Learning. I'm Julie Lammers, Senior Vice President of Government Relations and Advocacy for American Student Assistance. And we're really here to talk about an important topic about youth workforce development and work-based learning, and to hear from some experts who have transformed their programs to digital experiences in the face of COVID-19. As some of you may know, American Student Assistance is a national nonprofit committing to helping young people know themselves, know their options, and to make informed choices to achieve their education and career goals. We provide students resources online, digitally, and in person to help them explore and experiment with a wide range of options ahead of them so that they can better plan for their education career path. But we know that those options are not the same for all students. COVID-19 has laid bare the massive education inequalities that exist in our society and shone a light on the realities of what many students face on a daily basis to receive a quality education in our nation. Lack of access to technology, the stress of COVID itself, the lack of personal connections to mentors like teachers and counselors has left many students floundering and disengaged. This year more than ever, we need to find ways to ensure that students have opportunities to build skills they need for academic, workplace, and lifelong success. And when students don't have those opportunities like work internships or other work-based learning experiences, they have less of an ability to build the skills and social capital they need to be successful in the working world. Lack of exposure to work also means that students don't have a chance to build their occupational identity, to really discover what motivates them and what drives their passions. So our panelists today will have unlocked a few of the ways to create high quality digital work-based learning experiences. Initially, as a reaction to the necessity of COVID-19 shutdowns, these programs now need to be leveraged as really important lessons learned on how we provide greater access for either rural students or underserved students to participate in internships, apprenticeships, and other career-focused learning. So these programs are currently being used to engage students in remote work-based learning experiences, remove barriers to access for high school students, and allow for greater coordination and flexibility between students, schools, and employers. So we've got an impressive group of panelists here today to explore these important topics and share their experiences. Helen Russell, founder and executive director of Apprentice Learning. Nina Pandey, executive director of Skills for Rhode Island's Future. And Jewel Alderson Clark, integrated curriculum coordinator, for San Diego County's Office of Education. So Helen, maybe we'll start with you. I'd love you to quickly introduce yourself and your organization, then we'll go on to Nina and Jewel to do the same. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and the programs that you work on to ensure that students have access to apprenticeships and other work-based learning opportunities. Helen, you're still on mute.
Thank you, Julie. It's great to be part of ASU GSV this year. My background is in outdoor education and experiential learning. And what we did was really take that whole concept of experiential learning and adapt it to career education. And we did an additional adaptation, as you mentioned, with COVID, and we offered all of our programs virtually this year. So Apprentice Learning is 10 years old, and we are a career education program for middle school students in underserved schools in Boston. In partnership with a school, all 8th graders participate in a set of prep sessions where they discover their skills and interests and learn essential professional skills around self-advocacy and communication that prepare them for a work-based learning experience. We call it an apprenticeship. That's guided by a career mentor from a business. During their apprenticeship, students then have an opportunity to put these essential skills into practice while they learn about the culture and purpose of a business. This year, we served 300 8th and rising 9th graders in our apprenticeship program, and 35% of those we helped land a paying summer job. We also offer 2 internship opportunities, one in the summer and one during the school year, that deepens the skill sets for 15-year-olds.
Great, thank you very much. Nina, let's turn it over to you.
Thank you, Julie, and good afternoon. I'm also excited to be here today to be one of the panelists to talk about how to use technology and leverage technology to further the educational experiences of our youth. At Skills for Rhode Island's Future, we're a statewide workforce intermediary where we work with adults and high school students, trying to connect jobs to individual talent. 3 or 4 years ago, actually now 4 years ago now, we learned that many of our employer partners who we work with to find talent really had a deep interest in figuring out how to strengthen our local educational system and make meaningful connections between what happens in the classroom and how to apply it to real world work experiences. So we set out to start an internship program called Prepare RI, where we initially had a place-based internship program. But Julie, as you said, with COVID, everything was upended and we were challenged to figure out how to pivot our program so that students continue to have those really meaningful experiential learning opportunities during critical summer months where we know that there could be a lot of learning loss and there's not a lot of opportunities for really rich, engaging connections to employers. So we pivoted our model 2 years ago to what was then coined the COVID-19 Innovation Challenge, where we worked with employers around our state to develop real world problems that our employer partners were challenged with because of COVID. And we put those in the form of problem statements and gave those challenges to our students to solve with our employer partners around the table. We were met with tremendous success and we were able to do it by using technology to pivot our model to a virtual learning environment. And I'm happy to say that we repeated the virtual model this summer so that we can continue to engage students as we continue to navigate through the pandemic and want to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe. So this summer, we cohorted our students into 16 student-led corporations, where each of the student-led corporations have C-level executives who were tasked with managing their small groups of students to again solve real world problems that our employer partners are working with. And once again, it was through technology that we're able to pivot our model. We use a lot of different programs to make sure that our students are not only learning how to work cooperatively and build those critical skills, but we're introducing them to technology that we know is going to be absolutely essential for them to be successful in the workplace.
Great. And Jewel, tell us a little about the work that you do for the San Diego County Office of Education.
Thank you, Julie. I am the Integrated Curriculum Coordinator, and so my role is to support career readiness initiatives throughout the San Diego County region. San Diego County is actually has about 500,000 students in our county alone, with 42 school districts, 100 and some odd charter schools. And so as the County Office of Education, our role is to really support across all of these districts. And when it comes to work-based learning, our #1 board goal is to connect all students to the world of work. That means that our organization has put into place in our college and career readiness team, an entire team focused on work-based learning. And so as we looked at the challenges our districts were facing, we were really able to pivot and provide a lot of virtual interactions for students, which we'll talk about throughout today, but it really allowed us to increase access because with 500,000 students, no matter what we do in person, we are never going to hit the number of students that we really want to have these experiences. So it increased the number of students who could access it. We also have districts. If you took the bottom of California and cut it in half, that's San Diego County. And so some of our districts are 2 hours away. So it also increased access for those students so they didn't have to take that distance in order to experience real world learning opportunities with industry partners. And so it's been a very exciting time where we were able to create a lot of digital content that students could engage with interactively or from home in a pre-recorded fashion. And so we're very excited to be here and share some of our learning and resources with you all.
Thanks so much, Jewel. I appreciate it. So Nina talked a little bit about the model that they pivoted to as the pandemic, it forced a lot of shutdown in schools and community-based organizations. I wonder, Helen, if you can talk a little bit about the apprentice learning model. You are, a service provider that works in the school with students on a day-to-day basis. Clearly, that was upended by COVID-19 and the need to shift virtually. So what did that new model look like? And what were some of the things that you put in place in order to make sure that it was a successful program this year?
Well, schools had one day a week where there were no scheduled classes. It was all asynchronous learning, and they allocated that day to us. So we had as many as 90 students and sometimes 30 employers on a Zoom call. In fact, we had a designated Zoom navigator, and really each Zoom room became a small business. We had things like acting with a professional actor. We had boat building, where the 20 students who had elected to learn about boat building had a kit delivered to them by the boat builder to build a 10-inch model boat. We also, our staff, because the students are, all located in a relatively small area, unlike Jules' district, staff were able to deliver work from home kits because we realized that young people didn't have notebooks and ring lights to light up their darker spaces. We incentivized kids with things like headsets. We also were able to pull in partners that we wouldn't ordinarily work with because they weren't in our geographic area. So young people worked with a large manufacturing company that manufactures parts for oil rigs in the Gulf Coast, and worked with them to develop a piece of PPE based on a kit that we had put together. And engineers then worked with the kids and then talked about the engineering process. So we had quite a variety. Particularly for middle school students, and these are all students, many of them are English language learners or students who have a history of academic failure. So it was very important for us to develop not only choice, so they felt like there was some option for them to pick, but also something that really appealed to young people that we were competing with who were playing video games. So we really had to sort of step it up in terms of the hands-on skill set.
That's excellent. So, Nina, Helen mentioned this a little bit, but I'd love you to speak to some of the challenges that you encountered as you were beginning to roll out your programs initially. What were some of the barriers that both students and employers were really faced with in the first year of moving from what is usually a very hands-on, face-to-face experience to one that's done virtually?
Yeah, I think the single biggest challenge that we had is this was happening at a time where we're all just figuring out what this pandemic was about, right? I don't even know if we had called it a pandemic at that point because we're at the very early stages. And our single biggest challenge was we had youth who wanted to still work in person, right? And they had already expressed to us that they already had Zoom fatigue within the first 2.5 months of going remote. So we needed to make sure that whatever we did, we would overcome any of those engagement issues that we had heard were going on at school. And then we also had the same with adults as they were trying to pivot. And so our biggest change was figuring out how to do engagement authentically and do it virtually, right? And then also, how do you replicate a work environment virtually so that it made sense and so that students could still learn some of those tangential skills, right? Those social skills of engagement with adults and figuring that out. And so understanding that the nature of that mentoring relationship would really change, being, place-based into a virtual model. So those are some of the big things. And then some of the obvious is not all students are equipped with the technology that they need to be successful. So we had to make sure that we were providing technology that would meet the rigors of the program. Many of our students had already been outfitted with things like Google Chromebooks, which are a great tool, right? And they're a very affordable solution, but they don't necessarily meet the demands of the employers and what they need to learn. So we had to make sure that we created a lending library, made sure that our students had a space in their home that was safe for them to operate out of. Similar to Helen, whether it was giving them equipment or any supports that they needed to make that happen, that was important. And then I also think understanding curriculum and how it would be dosed virtually was really important for us to understand. And then also making sure that our students had the supports. Place-based, it's easy to identify challenges when students may not understand a problem or are struggling, but virtually it's easy for them to hide. So how are we going to make sure that they actually had the supports to continue to build their skills, whether it was remedial skills, and we wanted to make sure that students had access to those support services. I'm not going to lie, it wasn't perfect. We experienced a lot of students. Many of them were highly engaged, highly enthusiastic, up in the morning, working late at night, getting to the problems. whereas others fell behind and were short on their kind of us meeting their expectations, and we were short on resources to be able to support them. We also underestimated the social and emotional needs that our students had, and then also the digital literacy skills that our students had. We figured pivoting to virtual would be right up their alley because they were all born with cell phones in their hands and laptops on their laps, right? But what we realized is that digital literacy skills in the real world is very different than what our students are being exposed to. So those are some of the challenges that we went into a continuous improvement board to say, okay, how do we improve our services and our delivery and our engagement to make sure students will continue to learn through a virtual world?
And so on the employer side, I know it was also a bit of a challenge to engage employers in this, as you said, employers were still trying to figure out how to navigate a virtual work environment, but they are also not used to mentoring students virtually. So what are some things that you've learned from that experience? And are there things that you pivoted to this year in order to make that more effective?
We did. We certainly spent more time cultivating the relationships with our coaches and mentors as we were going into this summer. And then we built a strategic partnership with Mentor, their local chapter of Mentor RI, to deliver actual training to our coaches and mentors so that they knew what authentic engagement looked like in a virtual world. That was really helpful. And then we also had one of our biggest challenges getting back to technology was our employer partners had technology platforms that didn't integrate with ours. And so if they were in their office and operating from their office, a lot of times there were issues with firewalls where they couldn't access our links and they had specific technology platforms that they had to use. So we literally were reinventing ourselves every day on the fly as these challenges came up. And so we learned from last summer to have those conversations with our employer partners before they even engaged with us to ensure that they can support the students adequately throughout the summer and making sure that we weren't creating additional barriers for them to be able to have that authentic engagement.
That's great. Jewel, talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced. Huge school district, a lot going on, a lot you had to navigate, but really important for you and for the district to ensure that students still had these experiences and were engaging in a meaningful way. So just talk to us a little bit about what that looks like.
Absolutely. Well, in addition to all of the many problems that we all know and talk about a lot, like internet access and access to the right technology, because we know that a Chromebook is not enough to do the level of industry preparation that they need. One of the biggest challenges we came across is actually privacy. And so when we created synchronous opportunities for students to interact with industry, because it drew students from multiple districts, and they were mixed with adults from industry, now we had to have permission slips signed by their parents to enable them to actually be interactive so that their name might be seen, that their privacy was was definitely looked at very carefully. So we have a legal team at the County Office of Ed who helped to create digital permission slips. We get the permission slips up and we're going to create this entire student experience. We had an educator conference, Go Virtual Career Pathways Conference, and we decided to have a student strand so that students could have synchronous learning opportunities from industry while their teachers went to synchronous learning, right? We're like, this was the magic, right? It turned out that many of the districts blocked the email from SCED that gave the students access to those actual sessions. So in the background, we're trying to manage a whole plethora of things going on. Meanwhile, we're recording everything. Everything's available afterwards for students. But our intention was, with certain regulations about how much time students were spending synchronously, we said, all right, we have this handout. You can have your students fill out while they attend these and get to interact. And so that would count as like 1 hour of instructional minutes that day while your teachers were learning side by side in their own sessions. So that was definitely a big crash and burn for us, even though we thought we had everything set. And so as we continued to do that, we were able to evolve those practices and work more directly with teachers to send out those kinds of announcements. And so it's something that, as you begin, this was October of 2020 that we had that particular conference. things changed. We tried a lot of different ways. For our apprenticeship fair, we went to all of the apprenticeships in San Diego County. We actually purchased new video equipment. Our team went in, did tours, got that information, and we released it every day. We released a new video where we didn't need permission slips because it wasn't interactive, but we love the interactive opportunities for students, even in these, the certain programs where it's not the level of work-based learning that we really want to see, where students are really engaged in doing meaningful work when we get into internships and apprenticeships themselves, but those entry-level experiences are what bring them to that point. And so we really wanted to make sure we had those in place. We had a lot of industry reach out to us so that we could help connect them. Biocom is a local organization that actually supports biotech industries across the country and the world as one of their membership organizations, and they have internships. And so they went to digital, and they're asking us, will the kids have computers? It's like, okay, this doesn't. So like, let me reach out to the district and make sure the district lets the kid keep the computer for the summer. And so, it's really having relationships with our industry partners so that when they are doing this work, we're there to help bridge into our mini school districts and navigate those systems so that our students can still have them.
That's great. And so this is a question I think probably for all of you. I think it seems we're at a point where employers want to be more engaged with students, be part of helping to solve a problem that they really see as an employer, as trying to build a qualified pipeline for their future workforce. How do your programs help to engage students, employers? What are some of the support services that you have used either through technology or just through the systems that you've created over time to ensure that employers are really actively engaged in providing high quality services to students? And as you said, Jewel, it could be a job shadow or some sort of industry tour or done either in person or virtually. It could be an in-depth internship or apprenticeship like Helen and Nina provide. There's a variety of opportunities for employers to be engaged. Just curious how you've managed that process, because that seems to be a huge challenge for a lot of program providers and those looking to stand up internships and other work-based learning experiences. So maybe we can start with you, Jewel, and go down the line.
Sure. I think a lot of it comes back to building that relationship so that when we hit this moment of a pandemic and everyone's scrambling to figure out what it is, they reached out to us at the County Office of Ed to help them prepare to go out and work with students. We are continuously building these relationships, but we did see a lot of industry partners pivot themselves. One of our local industry partners is Taylor Guitars, and they actually work with certain classrooms and give them kits so that students are building their own Taylor guitars in their fine woodworking course. And they were able to help the schools pivot in order to send home kits so that students could actually continue to do this work from home, clearly without the level of equipment they normally would have, right? So it's really being there to help manage that and having those long-term relationships, no matter where you're going. We don't know what is going to happen next with COVID or any other new thing, but by being connected to our employer network, we are here to help bridge that gap. We also try to really look to them for guidance as well. Last year, we released a really significant essential skills toolkit with our employer partners with a lot of digital rubrics and teachers' guides and things like that. And so making sure that we are not only here to bridge that gap, but looking to them for expertise and then sharing ours is really the key. And this is with or without a pandemic.
Yeah, it's great. Helen, you mentioned that you may have been interacting with employers that you might not otherwise have actually had the experience to provide experiences to your students, that it was an opportunity to break down barriers to access to a diverse set of employers. So tell me a little bit about that. Is that certainly a hopeful step for the future as we use technology to ensure that there is greater access to opportunities like this? Talk a little bit about your employer engagement.
And yeah, we had really a influx of new employers, interestingly, which was a perfectly wonderful solution to a number of retail stores and small stores where our eighth graders typically go to stock shelves or, do inventory. So that was a real plus. I think for us, there were two things. One is really asking employers to make a commitment that this isn't just a one-shot deal. This is teaching. We're really encouraging employers to be teachers. And for eighth graders, they're teaching things like how to ask questions, how to ask a forwarding question, how to appear on screen, engaging students in a way that allows them to ask questions of adults that they don't know. I mean, these are all very, very fundamental skills, and they're about relationship building. And, in many ways, success in the workplace begins with a young person feeling comfortable and feeling a sense of belonging. So we really emphasize that with our employers. We give out a handout ahead of time, really, that describes the sort of the developmental age of our students. And then one wonderful thing that happened as a result of all of the workplace mentors coming together is that we had a follow-up session that allowed individuals to share highlights from the day. And we had sort of a little debrief that really was building on best practice. And that came together as a community of best practice. We don't have an opportunity always to have our employers meet one another, but it created a very nice positive environment. And we found that employers were sort of lingering after their apprenticeship, just have an opportunity to talk with one another and hear about what everyone was doing. So it created a really nice shared sense of helping. And I think for many of the corporate partners, it was not what they would describe as a heavy lift. So there was a preparation, there was an orientation session that we held with all of our partners again together in a larger collective. But the time was not as big a commitment as, say, having an intern in your office for 20 hours a week. So I think all of that was very positive, and the internet did make it possible. We had people calling in from London for one of our stock market sessions. So that was really a benefit.
That's great. So I will turn it over to Nina now, but while I do, we did have a question in the chat asking what employer partners had learned and if they'd shared any feedback from the experience. So I know, Nina, you asked quite a few questions of your employers. You did an employer survey afterwards. So I don't know if you had any high level information you could share with this person.
We did, and I'm hoping our employer partners aren't listening to Helen saying there wasn't a heavy lift of their employer partners, because we ask our employer partners for the stars and the moon and everything else, right? Because if we're going to get serious about strengthening our educational system, I'm a firm believer that employers have to be front and center at the table, because our future talent pipeline is their single greatest asset. So we ask a lot of our employer partners. That said, we also provide tremendous support to our employer partners. And I like to say, we take the guesswork out of it. So no employer partner who we knock on their doors can say no. As the intermediary, we take care of all the legal responsibility. We ensure that we secure funding to pay wages for the internships. In fact, all of the interns who go through our program become an employee of Skills for Rhode Island's Future. And we take on, again, all of the workers' comp, all of the liability. We help our employer partners shape and design what a program could look like for them. And again, whether that was place-based or in a virtual world. In terms of what our employer partners have learned, one is that their voice is more powerful than they realize in this space, and they're starting to see the value that they bring in helping shape education. And I also think for me, this was a big learning for me, and I think our employer partners will all agree, our students are far more talented and far more insightful and intelligent than we give them credit for. And to see our employer partners evolve their thinking around what our interns can do has really been possibly the greatest inspiration that we can see for our kids, right? I just go back to one of our corporations last summer who was working with a defense contractor on developing a wearable device for our US military. And the amount of engineering and technology and learning that went into it from a medical science perspective of understanding COVID symptoms to the technology that could deliver that. And I know that the engineers who were working with our students couldn't believe that they were 16-year-olds coming up with just such amazing ideas. And so for me, there's just been an awakening. I think there had been a lot of fear and trepidation about working with high school students. Most of our employer partners had college internship programs, but we're afraid of introducing the high school environment. We are finding that changing rapidly. And what we're also learning from our employer partners is there's an additional value and benefit for them, and that they're getting insights into what the Gen Z population is going to look like and what the workforce of the future is so that they can prepare. And they also use our internship as an opportunity to get emerging leaders within their respective organizations to serve as supervisors and build the skills of our employer partners. So we want to make sure that employers see this as a mutually beneficial opportunity. But again, if I were to say the single biggest takeaway is we've all been blown away by the talent that our kids come to the table with. If we create the right environment, if we give them the right supports, literally they can do anything and everything that we ask them to do. And I know our employer partners are thrilled by that.
That's great. So this is a question for all of you. I think so digitally enabled work-based learning is not a temporary fix to a temporary problem. I think we have seen that if it's not a complete virtual work-based learning, virtual working world in the future, it's at least a hybrid world where many employers are saying that it is unlikely that they will go back to a work environment that everyone is in an office space. So how are these opportunities helping kids build skills for how to work virtually and how to work and navigate an environment that they will need to be online? It will not just be the summer job that they have to figure out how to do this for, but the long-term working world. So first of all, I think that's one question. What are the types of skills you're trying to instill in kids to ensure that they understand? This is really the work of the future. We are not going back to an environment where we're all sitting around a conference room table every day. So what does that look like? What are your employers saying about that? And do you feel like students are believe that is the case, or do you think they believe that they are going to be going to a world that is different than a Zoom meeting at all times? What are you seeing?
Well, I can just respond briefly. We are really big on teaching punctuality and the importance of showing up on time and showing up. During the pandemic, 20% of the young people in Boston didn't show up for high school. And actually, eighth graders had a better attendance, but there was a very high rate of disengagement, as we all know. And suddenly, if we're doing a full day Zoom program, young people have to be on time 4 or 5 times because they're signing off for a break and then they have to sign back on. So I think those fundamental skills are really important. It's a level of accountability that I think most young people in the schools we were working in really didn't necessarily feel that they were being held accountable for. For example, no student had to turn on their computer camera during school. And for our program, we required it. So we had a lot of teaching to do around how to show up on Zoom and how to present yourself on camera. Those skills are very, very important. And again, we're working with 14-year-olds. So if a 14-year-old can understand what they're supposed to do, they can choose whether they want to do it or not. But if they understand what's expected in certain environments, I think we go a long way towards helping them be more prepared when they're 16 for a paying job.
I think in our program, our students definitely are fighting it, right? I don't think they've accepted that their future for 50% of them will involve some type of a hybrid work environment. But I think they're warming to the idea. I think, again, what we are seeing, and this is something that is a concern of mine, is that students who come from maybe more affluent areas where technology is a mainstay, where they have reliable internet access, where they have a designated space in their home that's safe, we see them with predictability on the camera, and we see them definitely thriving more than students who might come from lower income backgrounds where there might be some academic challenges, where they don't have the reliable technology. And it's something that we're watching, and it's something that we're trying to figure out how to close the gap on, because our single biggest fear is we will be boxing out the potential of a lot of talent who don't come equipped with the right tools at the right time, if you will. I think it's been interesting. It's been an interesting learning because it's highlighting the disparity that exists between income levels, between academic levels, and it gives us an opportunity to correct that ship right now. But I do think the students that are gravitating towards it, the students who did thrive in a remote environment for education, are excelling in our program. And again, I think that we need to be mindful that it's not going to be for everybody. I know that I still fight it 18 months into a hybrid work environment. And I also think it really depends on the industry that you're in. And so there are people who are going to always want to work in a service industry that'll require you to have some type of place-based interaction. And so we're starting to actually see that emerge as students are continuing their career exploration. And in fact, when we run some of our panel discussions where we're introducing students to different careers by industry leaders around our country now, because we have the opportunity to open that up, students are asking that question. It's one of the questions that they ask in the chat. Is this remote or in person? And if it's remote, they're like, okay, I'm all set. And so they're starting to know how to inquire about that. And that's another skill set that they may not have thought of. So it's just been a great learning experiment for them. And what's nice about teenagers, and perhaps the reason why I love them the most, is they'll tell it like it is. And they'll be like, yeah, miss, you know what, this isn't for me. And so we'll look for other careers that is for them. And it's great for them to identify that early on as well, right? Can you survive in a remote environment? And so again, it's just another form of career exploration, another add-on that I don't think we had thought about prior to the pandemic. And it's forcing those conversations to happen. And I'd rather they know that at 16, by the time they graduate from college, and then go into an environment where it is remote working, where they won't be successful.
Yeah, that's great. So we only have 5 minutes left. So, and I think one final question I'd love to ask, and I know you had some of experience with this, Nina, last year as you were building technology on the go, but we're sitting before a large group of technology companies, people that are eager to create opportunities for solutions to some of the challenges that you face. You've been very successful in moving a lot of these programs online. But what technology would help you do it better? Are there certain things that you still need, or you still see as huge challenges to your expansion or to continued access for students?
Yeah, we've certainly toothpicked our solutions together because there's no one out of the box solution. I think for me, to any of the tech companies out there, we really need to figure out how to use technology to create more experiential learning, whether that's with virtual learning labs, figuring out how to maybe take virtual reality, be able to bring it into a Zoom meeting differently, or any kind of a web-based platform meeting. I think what we miss and what our students miss is that authentic experience. So it's great if they can use a whiteboard and be able to put ideas on there, but then how do they actually get to more prototyping? How do they get to more a virtual lab environment where they get to see on the inside of what a space looks like? So for me, things like experiential learning, how do we take technology, really expand on what that looks like in a virtual world, those learning labs, using virtual reality, to be able to create that authentic engagement would be really helpful for us. And I think it'll help contextualize the learning for our students very differently.
Great. Jewel, Helen, same question to you.
Yeah, so one of the kind of call to action I could have for any tech companies that are on the call, I think one of my mantras is stop asking kids what they want to be when they grow up, but instead ask them what problems they want to solve, and then show them how to solve it, and have them work on authentic problems in the K-12 space. And so sharing the authentic challenges you're working on in technology and giving students a chance to do that is very powerful. So if you have a platform that's student facing, engage the students in actual real world challenges. If you need some students to follow up on those challenges, contact one of us and we will help connect you to actual students who may give you insight you never realized that you could have. So don't be afraid to reach out to your local education system and bring that real world challenge home for our students.
Great. And Helen, I'll end with you. Nina said she'd also like to add in language challenges and ADA compliance. So, those are big concerns for her. But let's, if you could give us some thoughts.
I just think, headsets. So many students are visual learners, particularly middle school students. And is there a way to kind of create enough access by bringing the prices down? So you could give a young person a headset and a controller, and they could learn how to, even fly a plane or, explore a cave underwater. I mean, I think there's so many things that really are so exciting, but there's barriers in schools.
That's great. Nina, did you want to add any other thoughts?
I do. And, Jewel, you probably know this well. One of my hats is I served on the school board in the city of Providence for many, many years. And as we pivoted to the virtual world, there were not a lot of resources out there for our English language learners. And again, authentic learning. There was a lot of stuff that had been translated. And so I am a big fan of ensuring that there is some kind of side-by-side learning in multiple languages and not just through a computerized translate function. And then also for our student learners who have special needs, making sure that there is ADA compliance along the way, because while there is adaptive technology, a lot of it is expensive and not accessible. And I think when we had to pivot, and Jewel, you will know this much better than I did, right? It was trying to figure out how to once again identify resources for all of our student learners and not just the mainstream. And so there needs to be some additional thought around how are we going to make sure that we are ensuring access to all of our students, and technology we know can be a big bridge to that.
We are surprisingly out of time already. So thank you all for joining us. I really applaud all of your leadership in this, your adaptability, and really your commitment to ensure that students have what they need in order to be successful. We at American Student Assistance thank you for all that you do. If you want to talk more to some of our panelists, all of their information is available in the ASU GSV app. I think anyone would be happy to hear from you, so please reach out there through our email or reach out to us at one of our organizations if you have any follow-up questions. I am Julie Lammers with American Student Assistance, and thank you very much for joining us today.